Voila! Welcome to episode 101, actually. Last week I forgot that we actually started from episode 0. So therefore last week was the 100th celebratory event. But now we have the numerical number 100. But anyway, Quarkus Insights. We have two guests today. Roland and Gregor, which is going to talk about our chatbot. But before we jump into that, I have a little bit of a few news I want to cover. If I can get my screen to work. There we go. Voila. Yeah, so a few things. Oh, yeah, we actually got the new Corkers tools. I'm looking at the Corkers blog here now. So if you guys haven't tried yet, so we have Corkers tools, which are for different IDs. IntelliJ is the one that last got updated. And there's VS Code and there's Eclipse. And this is IntelliJ itself also has one that comes with the commercial version, but this one can be used with any other one. But the other one I wanted to show was that our website now is available in multiple languages. This is we have in Spanish, simplified Chinese, and Japanese. So let's see, I can go, whoop, that one. So if you understand, simplified Chinese, Japanese, then you're all good. It's actually done by a bunch of community members who set up an automatic, semi-automatic translation, which they then verify by humans, not by a chatbot, but a translation bot. And then it all gets verified by humans, so it should also make sense once it gets through. And we have the Quarkus 2.11 release. And then we have I don't have a page for that one, so let me turn this one off. Another thing we've been working on is Jakarta support. So Quarkus uses what's that called? The Jakarta 8 API, but it still has the JavaX package names in the package name classes. But for various interesting reasons, the name has package name now has to be changed to Jakarta for the more open product. And Jakarta is a whole umbrella of things. There's Jakarta platform, which is not what we're talking about here, but there's a lot of Jakarta products. So like a JPA or the server spec or the JAX.js specs that we Quarkus implements. All are changing package names. So that's always a challenge. We don't have exact dates for when this will happen, but soon, when soon is like in the next year. But what's really cool is that we actually have a branch now in Corkers. Another branch, we have in the main development of Corkers, there is now a little script that can convert over the existing Quarkus code base to use the Jakarta code base, Jakarta package names. So if you are someone who are working on a Jakarta, on a framework that is integrated with Quarkus and want to look and see how it works with Jakarta 9 and 10, take a look at the Quarkus dev main list. I think Guillaume, the main, what do you call that, the release guy, the maintaining a ton of stuff, but especially he's also maintaining the Jakarta stuff, is asking for people to help fix a few things that is missing, but also means that there's now a snapshot build of that branch that people can try out and use with their version of Hibernate 6 or other things that are targeting Jakarta. So anyway, I just want to give a heads up that that is there, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, go to Quarkus Dev. There's a mail list about that topic. Anything else I've missed, Georgios?
Just that we'll have a 2.12.0 final pretty soon.
Oh yeah, is that this week? Yes, it is.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a bit. The last 2 months has been very quiet because of summer.
Yeah, summer in Europe. For those of you who are in the States, summer in Europe, month of August pretty much doesn't exist.
So anyway, But let's go back to the main event. Before I introduce, we have the chat where you can ask questions, and you can talk about anything about Corkers, or especially the EDDI chatbot we're gonna talk about here. And you ask a question, and then me and George will try and mix it in with the conversation we're having here, and yeah, we keep it fairly light. And yeah, so I'll let Roland and Gregor introduce themselves, and we take it from there. Who wants to start?
Roland, you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. So, hi, I'm Roland. I'm a software developer on the EDDI team in Labs AI, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to make cool chatbots, make available for developers, and I'm mainly focused on the data side of things. So I'm storing JSON files in MongoDBs mainly. So, Gregor, your turn.
Thank you. My name is Gregor Jarisch. I am the original inventor of EDDI in 2006, so quite some time ago. We are now looking at the 5th major iteration since then, which also contains the migration to the framework Quarkus away from self-built, chatty, rest easy, and choose combination. And yeah, EDDI as such shall be the framework that shall help a lot of developers, especially Java developers and Quarkus developers, of course, to build chatbots and connect them to their current applications and APIs in order to make that a very, very easy process.
Cool. And just so maybe can you introduce us to what you mean by EDDI and chatbots? Because I think there might be.
Yeah, sure. So EDDI, you might ask yourself where it comes from. It's basically abbreviation Enhanced Dialogue-Driven Intelligence, EDDI short, so make it easy to remember. And chatbots are basically virtual assistants. So anytime you're having a chat and computer answers to your inputs, you are talking to a chatbot. So very often that's the right bubble in the website that will ask you, do you need any help? And some other times it's a shopping assistant in a website, or it could be a teaching advisor that helps you choose the right courses or find friends and these kind of things. So all kinds of use cases where it's really automating a human conversation with the sake of solving some specific problem for the user. So there could be any micro interaction where usually there's another human being on the other end, but that's something where it is very easy to automate, right? And anything that's very easy to automate, where intelligence is not needed to solve a specific problem, but rather the knowledge how to use an API or how to sort of get information in and out of the system, then chatbots very often are a good idea to look into.
When you say chatbot, is that like the bots that are like on a web page, or is it also in like Slack or SC or
the word? I would say all of it. The word as such is really sort of an umbrella term for everything that sort of makes a computer talk to a human being in a natural language and sort of react to that. So yes, absolutely. I would say all of that can be spanned on that term.
And
Cool.
as EDDI is mainly an API, it can be put into any channel that you like. So we've used it in Slack, we've used it in Facebook, we've used it in whatever channel you can think of. You can use it on the web page. EDDI in itself is the API for doing the logic that you need in order to have a chatbot, but it's not necessarily a channel for chats.
Sorry, it's not necessarily what? Sorry, not a channel.
A channel for chats. So if you need a chat for a framework, that's not EDDI. EDDI is a bot framework that enables your chat environment, whatever you're going to need, to have bots.
Okay, got it. So do you want to show something or demo or explain? Then we can maybe get a better idea for it.
Sure. So first and foremost, I think for everybody interested to check it out, eddi.labs.ai. I shared the link before. Maybe you guys can share it so everybody can see it. Is a good starting point. The website will bring you to a GitHub repository or to various marketplaces, cloud providers that all have sort of EDDI available for trying it out easily. And I think GitHub, so to speak, if you are tech interested, is the place to go, especially when you want to run it locally. Having that said, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of what we did in the beginning when we wanted to have Quarkus or migrate to Quarkus, and then showing specifics in the code of what we did here.
Can I ask a question before you get into that?
Yes, please.
Why did you want to migrate to Quarkus initially?
Multiple reasons, I would say. I think not particularly in that order of priority, but as it comes to mind, it's definitely one aspect, the different upgrades of library, whether that's a Jackson library or Chatty or whatnot, and then making sure everything still works together, which is often when it's not designed for it, it doesn't work together or create new issues that nobody's seen before, or maybe not a few people. But since Quarkus is sort of meant to integrate various libraries and make them work with each other, I think that was a big plus. On the one hand, not needing to sort of be on top of all the updates all the time, but also making sure whenever there's an update coming that it will be compatible with the rest of the platform. I think that was definitely a big one. Generally speaking, making it more accessible. I think if you are an open source framework, then chances are higher people start using it when you use technology that people are used to. And we were using a combination of REST Easy and Chatty and Google Choose, and especially Google Choose as dependency injection framework. But the combination as such was not something people would be super familiar with. And that was sort of one of the main reasons why we felt, okay, if we want to make it more accessible, easy to use, and especially easy to get started if you want to build a chatbot by yourself, then Quarkus would be looking in the long-term future, probably also the current status quo, but specifically in the next month and years to come, the best choice for a framework to migrate to.
Cool. And you haven't explored? So your move to Quarkus was mainly you were having your own, let's say, home-bred collection of frameworks. You use stuff like REST EC or whatever, but it's kind of mixed together.
Yeah.
And then you say, hey, let's find something else so you can focus on building the chat framework and let others deal with all the lower level stuff. Makes sense.
Yes.
And is the native parts a part of this or not?
Where we want to be, we don't offer it right now, but still a plan to be done, and the option to have it sort of or offer it as a Docker container in the future is great. I think particularly also the startup times, also for the non-native builds, are also have improved incredibly. So that such as well is something that's very positive. We feel it's already so fast that we don't really need a native build, but like for the sake of technically it's sexy, we kind of want to do it. It's just a matter of sort of getting to it on the roadmap.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we will see, because we are also in the process of making EDDI a cluster. Normally EDDI runs in Kubernetes, so in a Kubernetes environment. So it is restarted. It can be restarted at any given time. And of course, the faster it's up again, the better. So the shorter the time that people lose connections to their bots and things like that. So that's one of the main reasons why startup time is extremely important for us, because we want to be like all those Node.js services that are out there running on Docker containers starting in milliseconds. We just want to be there as well. And if that's necessary, then of course we will be going native. Currently, we're fine with the startup times without being native.
That's, by the way, a good aspect of it. I think a lot of, if you look at the chatbot landscape, there's a lot of other frameworks that are either developed in Node.js or Python. Specifically, those two seem to be more or less the entire landscape of chatbot development. And there was the argument back in the days that these applications spin up way faster than Java applications, which originally or traditionally speaking was the case, or still is the case with most of the frameworks. And sort of to combat this kind of argument and really to be up to speed with all the other chatbot frameworks specifically out there, that was an incredible important step for us.
Yeah, for what it's worth, yeah, in my previous job, yeah, we did do Node.js for chatbots.
Awesome. Well, you guys go ahead and show what we have. Yeah.
Yeah, so not really to show, but maybe another one to ask and then to show or to tell about. I think the migration is something that was tricky for us, specifically the way we had our project set up. It was not so easy to get it all the way working with Quarkus. For instance, one thing was we had a multi-Maven model architecture. So one project, multiple Mavens inside. And what happened is that we encountered once we ran it the first time with Quarkus that we had multiple cycling dependencies that we didn't have previously because, well, at runtime, the cycling dependency were not there, but at build time, all of a sudden they were there. So we ended up having to refactor quite, not particularly code, but restructure the code and ended up actually having it with one Maven model, as it seemed to be way easier than the multiple Maven models. And just generally, it's much easier if you sort of start fresh with a Quarkus app and then migrate step by step to it, rather than trying to, you have your application and then you exchange the libraries to Quarkus and boom, hopefully it works. No, it doesn't. So it's really much easier to migrate one piece by one and then make sure everything is there that you need.
Yeah. So, okay, so that meant you had before, how many modules do you have before? Like 2 or 3 or 50, or what number are we talking here?
About 20. So we had split it up between interfaces and implementations, and then for each component within the EDDI framework was basically a separate model.
Okay. And what? So what were the? So you're saying Quarkus required a build time? We trying to normalize everything and resolve everything.
Yes.
So you were relying on lazy setup, or was it a good thing that Quarkus forced you to, or was it? What was the?
Well, retrospectively speaking, having one module or one Maven module is not bad. So I'm okay with having that the way it is right now. I don't think the cycling dependencies. I mean, like the issue that we faced was not an issue before, and since it was all one application, but Maven kind of assumes it's or doesn't know that there are other modules necessary, the cycling dependencies come into play, and I think that is just sort of an architectural problem as such way. So that's why I think we were forced to do it that way. Let's put it like that. I think there was not really another chance to get around.
No, it's one of those. Well, it maybe have a hard to catch on, but it's one of those things that we've seen where products are kind of relying on magical things goes away at runtime. Where we are saying, well, if you resolve a build time, yes, you might lose a bit flexibility, but you gain that you can compete with Node.js and Python startup times in that space. So I'm just wondering if there was any. Well, what we generally see is it just requires people to realize, oh, yeah, we didn't actually need that flexibility, and it's actually fine once you get there. But of course, it makes it a bit more inflexible. I'm just curious if you're in the same boat that, hey, yeah, it was nice we had everything separated out, but now that it's put together, it doesn't make a big difference, except that you now have a faster startup.
I think there's a couple of things where are hiccups that are not very intuitive. For instance, key clock integration. Key clock integration is a very specific one. We would like to have in our app the possibility to switch it on and off depending on runtime environments you hand over to the container. However, that doesn't work. You need to decide if you want to have key clock at build time. So specifically, if you want to have this, you need to build one container with key clock and one without, and then sort of tell people if you want authentication, you need to use one container over the other or one image over the other. And I think these kind of things, or that specifically, is a good example of where it makes it less flexible, where flexibility would be great to have.
Yeah. So just to mention that one, so Keycloak, I think we have the plan to bring them on at some point. But Keycloak still has this problem or challenge that they want to be able to switch between different database support, like Oracle, Postgres, whatever, and a few other things. And they actually drove us to add, I forgot what we call the feature, but basically they can now configure all the different options, but then they can run a separate step so that they can have the same build that has all the features, but then the user can run another build that strips out the stuff that they don't need, and they turn things on and off. So there might be stuff that you can look for. Maybe you can use a similar trick in EDDI to make that. I think. So
definitely, and I think there will be a solution eventually. It's just like you're talking about sort of migration and primarily not knowing these kind of issues, or not really understanding what is the issue behind it. I think that's really in-depth knowledge about a new framework. That's basically it. What's here the learning, I guess.
cool.
And
Yeah,
I think,
go ahead.
in the end, we didn't actually lose that much flexibility. I mean, what we lost was we had very, very neatly separated out the API from the implementation, which, if you need more APIs or more implementations, is really, really nice. But we never got to actually doing that. So in the end, we didn't lose anything.
Yeah, I heard that story before.
Well, we lost a lot of code because a lot of code was not needed anymore. So we had an embedded EDDI, an embedded Chatty server. So that was not needed anymore, and a lot of other glue code just to make stuff work. So easily 30 to 40% of code was gone just for the sake of switching over to Quarkus.
Very cool.
Cool.
Yeah, most EDDIs, especially Juice, had a lot of boilerplate stuff that we just don't need.
Very cool. Okay.
All right. So maybe some code sharing. So specifically, I thought just some small areas, not to go too much into detail. Sharing my screen here.
There you go.
You can see it. So this is basically the repository EDDI, and like one thing that I want to show, if it works, let me check behavior module. It's the way that we build our plugins. So specifically, it's very flexible in terms that you can extend it. So there are.
Can you zoom in just a little bit on the font? So just pin to zoom, I think. Oh, you're on Windows, maybe not.
Zooming in probably in the settings, right? Or maybe let me go into presentation mode.
Well, yeah, I don't know about Zoom, but you can
Yeah.
you can fix the font. Well, this is probably
good.
fine.
That's good.
So what we do is we have knowledge packages that are sort of almost like if you have an app as a phone and you have apps on it, is a chatbots and knowledge packages. And each of these knowledge packages have plugins that have a certain task to accomplish within the analyzing of what the user said, and then deciding of what needs to be done in order to give an output to the user. What we have here in front of us is how we register specifically the plugin of behavior rules. So inside the chatbot, we have the means that we can define rules in order to define how the chatbot should react, either to API responses, user responses, whatnot. And the way we do this is basically that we have here lifecycle extensions, which is basically using the native Quarkus dependency injection. And within these, we also have sort of plugins of the plugins. So the behavior itself contains multiple plugins. So matching the user input, matching what kind of actions was triggered before. So what did the chatbot do in previous steps, and so on and so forth. And I think this is a really good example of how easy it is to extend EDDI as such. So imagine you are running a local EDDI instance and you want to extend it, build your own chatbot, face the state that you don't have a certain condition that you need, something very specific, then you can easily sort of build it and then just sort of register with this type of mechanism to it, restart the application, and you would have it in there already. So I think that's one of the strong features that we now have, that is very easy, especially sort of with the we want to have an EDDI extension very soon, and especially then it will be very easy for Quarkus environments to sort of extend EDDI as such. But also, of course, if you just spin it up locally and
yeah, because there was if you go look now for EDDI, you'll find in Corkers there's an empty EDDI project.
Yes.
So can you show, like, because that was actually what I was trying to get to before the call, is like how to actually use EDDI. Can you show a bit of what it can do, and then maybe talk about what's coming in that Quarkus extension?
Yes. Quick.
If you need to share your screen again, or
Yes. Just 1 second. Just need to spin it up.
yeah. By the way, I did actually manage to run it on my. I just cloned it and ran Quarkus run. So
Okay. That should actually work out of the box.
It does. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, so application is building. But maybe I can show in the meantime. So this is, you still see my screen, I suppose. So this is the dashboard you would be coming up with when you start EDDI. And
can you make it a little bigger? Because it's probably hard to see on YouTube. Okay.
Yeah. How about this?
Yeah, it's probably good.
Okay. So basically what we have here is a collection of multiple chatbots. So the framework specifically is designed to run multiple chatbots, also in multiple versions. So that means when you develop a chatbot and then you have it in production and you need to make changes, that you're not all of a sudden changing the stuff in production, but like with each new configuration, you're generating new versions and then have the possibility to use different version and different bots and make sure upgrades are smooth. Smooth specifically meaning that when you have a conversation, so I'm going now into a simple one, the Weatherbot Conversation. So this is just a very simple one that gives you a better weather of a specific city. So let's say Vienna, for instance. And I just mentioned that configurations are specific to version numbers. So the interesting aspect here is when you have a current conversation. So conversation is like from the beginning here to conversation end here, and each of that is a conversation step. And when you update a chatbot, then you don't want to ruin this kind of process. You don't want somebody to be at that step and then you have sort of changed the logic and all of a sudden it breaks unexpectedly. You want that person to be able to continue that conversation with the old chatbot version, even if you already have released a new version. So we didn't do that here yet, but like imagine this was a running chatbot conversation and we would have released a new chatbot version while this conversation was going on. The new version would have been only used once a new conversation would have been started, in that case after the old conversation was ended, while the current conversation would still use the old chatbot version and therefore never breaks the UX unless there is a bug in there, of course. But like just speaking of updating on a running system where you don't have any moment where people would not use your chatbot, that's a very convenient way on making sure everybody gets a consistent user experience and you can upgrade basically at any given point in time without worrying about breaking the UX of your users.
And can I ask? So I got EDDI running and I had this board up and I could go through.
Yes.
And there's these like bots where it gives me multiple choice and then I click something, it goes to next.
Yeah.
But there's more. EDDI is not just that. It can also like parse what I write back to it, I guess. You just
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
Yes. So quick reply buttons are more mean to make it really fast, especially if you build chatbots that don't really have many options. Then it's sort of mean to the user to let them guess what is the option they need to type in order for it to work. So very often, if you have defined processes, so you know exactly what option the user will have, then quick reply buttons is the best way to go because it goes fast and it's relatively error-free in terms of the user wouldn't make any mistakes in using your chatbot. But of course, you can also define all kinds of dictionaries. I'm wondering if we have one in the example bots here. But like generally speaking, you can definitely define all kinds of dictionaries, phrases, words, and these kind of things that will be then translated in expression language. So basically, at the beginning, we translate every natural language part into a specific domain language that sort of holds the meaning of it, and then that one is processed further. And the natural language processing unit can also deal with spelling mistakes and grammatically differences in terms of what kind of tense is used and so on and so forth, and would recognize these things that you configure.
And just to be sure I understand where, let's say, EDDI starts when it stops. So EDDI is just the engine of the bot. It's not, there's no APIs for connecting to Slack or other things. You use something else for that.
Yes. So like you just saw this one chat environment that I used. So that's sort of coming pre-built in order to have some means of trying out the chatbot. But when you want to integrate it into a chatbot environment, into a chat environment like Facebook or whatnot, you will either need to build it yourself, or we have some of that available for our customers. But specifically, it's not really difficult. So I don't know, Roland, you did it a couple of times. I did it a couple of times. So I think it takes a few hours, if maximum, until it's there. So all the chatbot relevant aspects of it are covered. It's really just sort of getting the message into the framework and sort of reusing whatever comes out of EDDI, and then sort of plug and play into the channel of your choice.
Cool. And we actually got a question here now from Christopher Herman. Which natural language processing library does EDDI use?
We have developed one ourselves. It's a bit of a historical reason. Back in the days in 2006, there was not much available, and that's why we just decided to build one our own. It's a in-memory natural language processing unit, so meaning all the dictionaries and everything that is configured will be loaded into memory, and there it's sort of prepared in a way that processing can be as fast as possible. That's any traditional machine learning approach. That's something follow-up questions that people often use. So it's not it's more or less in a state machine or classical dictionaries that run with red black trees and these kind of sorting algorithms. Is it pluggable? Well, pluggable to what is the question? So yes, you can use it outside of the framework. Only the natural language processing unit it has an API for that. So yes, can be used as such. And within the Quarkus extension, not sure if I understand the question. Well, I think Dutch could be used in the Quarkus extension. So I guess
I think it's referring to if the NLP is plugged. Like, can you plug in a different NLP in EDDI? Maybe as a Quarkus extension. I think that's how I remember.
Not out of the box, but definitely doable. So we have in the natural language processor all kinds of means to plug in dictionaries or correction algorithms or formatter, and that would need to be done, but that shouldn't be much effort to get that done.
I can see he says exchangeable, like if it could be replaced.
Yeah.
And we actually have from Justice just sent him. Why did you choose Java Quarkus instead of Python?
Well, scrolling back to 2006, I don't remember being.
You're saying 2006, not 16.
No, 2006. So maybe I was not aware of it, but
before the financial crisis.
I don't know if Python was a big thing back then, especially for these kind of applications. I feel, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that was more or less in the last 10 years that Python developed in these kind of areas. Maybe 15 years, but definitely not in 2006. Well, okay. I think one very honest and easy answer to this, because that was the main language we knew, and we felt let's use the language that we know best. And also back in the days, 2006, Java was the absolutely unquestioned #1 choice, I feel, especially when it comes to kind of web services and these things. And still sticking to it, because there is no other Java chatbot framework that can be used as our framework, and therefore is a clear differentiator to all the other chatbot frameworks out there.
Okay. Is any like publicly or any examples you can mention that uses it that people can kind of maybe try out and see or understand? Or
freely try out is hard, but we have a couple of customers that use it. For instance, differ.chat. It's an communication application for students, where there's a chatbot connecting students with each other. So basically a matchmaking algorithm kind of a way of having this, and you would need to get access to the application, download it, then you could check it out, or simply spin up an EDDI instance, there's a couple of demo bots on there, simplified, but nonetheless a good way of having a look at how this can work. And I think that's probably the best way to get started.
Okay, cool.
Maybe one more about why Java, or the other way around, why it's useful to have it now in Java. So since sort of Java Quarkus, we have also made our way to certify our application. So we are now certified on the Red Hat Marketplace, IBM as well, already for a year now. Been the first chatbot framework that had been IBM Red Hat certified, and I believe ever since. And that's also a great accomplishment and something that we feel very proud of, that we have achieved all this.
So the certification here is about being on the Kubernetes OpenShift's
Marketplace, that's exact, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right. So maybe Roland has implemented or refactored our integration with MongoDB and other things. So maybe Roland, would you like to continue showing or talking about this a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit about that. So one of the things that we also wanted to do with switching to Quarkus was making our code more readable, easier to understand, and better to be used. And one of the things that we are relying heavily on is JSON documents that store pretty much everything in the chatbot. So from the conversation memory over all the stuff that is necessary to configure the bot. Everything's a JSON document. That's why, of course, we used MongoDB to store the stuff. And we did two things. We first of all, we wanted to use the streaming client for MongoDB, and then we looked at what Quarkus actually can help us with on that front. And in the end, we found that is extremely helpful that there is the possibility to just spin up a Mongo container as on dev, and we're using that. And this now really changes the development with EDDI for people using it, because now it is really just downloaded from GitHub, having Docker running, and then just press play and EDDI is there. So I'll share my screen quickly.
Yep.
So what we did is we have one entity or one class where we actually have our persistence module, and where we actually do the database configuration. And it used to be that we had all the configuration parameters somewhere stored, which you can actually in Mongo do a connection string, which most developers find more easily to be done than than just having look through all the configuration that you actually need to do to a client. And the second thing, of course, we switched to the reactive Mongo client implementation. So we now we now can do the whole JSON streaming stuff. And this used to be really long with a ton of configuration, ton of parameters. We were able to cut it down to just that. And our settings have been reduced in the end to just having the BSON codecs in there, and that's it. That made life much easier. And of course, the second thing that we're having is on the application configuration. MongoDB now is just a second, allows us now that we can use the dev services, and which you can just enable the thingy. So when I stop EDDI, I don't have any I don't have any Mongo running on my computer. You see, I've just stopped my standard Mongo instance, and the only thing that I need to do is I need to click press play, and then you can just see it starting up a MongoDB and is connected. So with that, I actually can go and open up localhost. This is the new machine. Everything is already there. I can deploy all the bots that we have as descriptor or as example bots, and if I want, I can just start chatting with it. So getting info about the weather bot that Gregor just showed, and let's say we want to have the weather in Oslo, and it's there. So
in this case, so here when it says Oslo, then it goes back to EDDI, and EDDI says, "Oh, that's the city has to look up." Then you've somehow configured EDDI to look up an API, or what's the?
That's what EDDI is really good at. We can communicate with any REST API that there is out in the world, and that makes we don't need. This is why EDDI is very much used in embedded environments where there is a lot of let's say different APIs out there, different systems that you need to talk to, because EDDI just enables you to talk to any API quite easily via just a JSON configuration, and then use that information in your chatbot. So what we're doing is, or what we are trying to enable, is that customers can use their own systems, their own stuff that they have via a chatbot. So condensing down the functionality for example, what I used it just lately was for a agile software where you just needed to say one thing in the Slack channel to move your ticket from one state to the next. And of course, that's much easier than going into the web service if you're already chatting with people about, I don't know, that ticket has been reviewed. And then you just said, then EDDI, the chatbot EDDI there just barged in and said, you want to move that because you removed it, and you just say yes, and it's moved. These kinds of things is what EDDI is used the most to actually help people facilitate their own things on environments where people are already talking about the things that they need to do.
We have a question. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jarisch.
Yeah, the question says. The question says, is integration with Cogito on the roadmap? For me, it looks like a perfect fit for backing the logic of the conversation.
I must admit, I am not familiar too much with Cogito.
It's the rules engine that,
Okay.
well, it's been around as Drools for a long time, but Cogito is the integration with Quarkus.
Yeah. Probably yes. The question is if it's much needed. We have a quite extensive rule engine that sort of covers at least most use cases we came across so far. So answer, yes, can be done, but question if it's needed.
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool.
Maybe real quick, Roland was showing before the Weatherbot, and maybe I'm sharing my screen real quick. Be able to show you guys how that looks like inside the manager. So we have a manager user interface, and we have here a couple of modules. So from behavior rules over the API connector, property settings, so basically what the bot should store over longer conversations, and then the output and templating of it. And specifically, we can go in there real quick to have a look on how this looks like. So this is a form, but specifically, like Roland mentioned before, it's a JSON files, and you have here groups, and you have behavior rules. And I don't know if it's big enough to get seen. Let me increase it a little bit further. And then you have basically conditions. And conditions can be anything from an input matcher that's checking what the user said in the current conversation step or what the user said previously. Maybe you could define negations that say, like, okay, if it was not that case, you could check for a certain context. So there's always a possibility to hand over a context alongside what the user said to sort of give EDDI an idea about the environment or condition a user is in case that is relevant in any way. And of course, also be able to match for expressions that are being triggered here. And specifically, since we said it before about the API connector here, Let's have a look into this again. JSON, since we're all technicians. So how that works is pretty simple, straightforward. You define here your server URL, so what kind of API you want to target. And then in the rules, whenever a rule succeeds, then we trigger actions. And whenever an action is triggered, then the plugins that follow after the rules in the lifecycle will listen to these actions and execute certain things. In that specific case, the HTTPI call to the weather API when that action is being triggered. And what we have here is basically the regular REST request as you would imagine it. So you have here the query parameters, where you could, for instance, here in that case, that's the way on how to input the user input and make it a query parameter. And then what kind of method you want. In that case, it's get. If you need a content type, you can set it. If you need the body, you can set it. If you need the response being saved, you can set it here, current weather. And the great thing about this is, as it usually JSON as a response, you would be able to use this directly in the response. And then you have also post-processing in that case that you can save it. And what I mean by post-processing makes more sense if we look at the next step, which is the outputs. Here in the outputs, you would then have the possibility to access these kind of things. So for instance, we save the response from the weather API in this object, and with properties.thatObject, and then everything here is basically part of the JSON that was returned. So in that JSON, we had a weather array, and in that there is a description, and that's what we access in here. So there is no need to develop anything further in order to access dynamically responses from an API in order to use it then in the output. So you have the possibility to create sentences like these that are, well, the sentence itself, but then it has variables, variable parts that need to be included at the particularly conversational step.
This JSON, is that the only way to configure, or is there also Java API to do it with, or what's the?
Well, the manager uses the EDDI Java, the EDDI REST API in order to configure it. So that's sort of the means. You have a bunch of REST APIs in order to create all these configurations for all these plugins, and then you have a package where you align all these plugins together so the chatbot knows in what order they should be executed. And you can do this completely over the REST API. You can do this over the manager that does it over the REST API. And if you want to use it directly in Java, well, there's the REST layer, and underneath is sort of the business logic that's more or less the same interfaces you could use there right away as well.
Got it.
But this is a thing that we are planning to do, that there's a Quarkus extension, EDDI, that just gives you a client to that REST API and the server just directly in Quarkus.
Okay. So what does that mean? I mean, so I can add EDDI to my Corkers app, and then kind of.
And I have a chatbot engine just there that I can use programmatically inside my program, inside my application.
Yes, if you want to specifically change something or add something in terms of functionality, if you feel whatever it offers right now is sufficient, then probably better to run it as a standalone server and connect to it via client, basically.
Yeah, because there's two run modes, right? There's one is embedded EDI, another one is having as a remote stuff where you do this JSON interaction and talk. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. That's usually what people use. So having a standalone application and just use the REST API with the manager, configure what needs to be configured, and then having other applications connect to it in order to realize the chatting as such.
Yeah.
But like I said, if somebody feels like, okay, well, I have a lot of idea, this is a great fundament, but it needs more functionality in one way or the other, then the embedded version of it does definitely make sense.
Yeah. I look forward to once you have the client, because we have this we have a bot written in what's it called in Quarkus, which is like a GitHub bot that we use for all our, well, what called it? It's GM2. It's like the it goes in and check different things. He also recently added, like, you can give it commands when you make a comment that you want to do something on an issue. But nothing fancy. But I was like, hey, maybe I want to try and hook in EDDI. But that was what I got stuck because there's no I had to run a process to do it, which I know you were doing in full production, but for us it was just like hey, we have this bot running already in a small instance somewhere. How could I use EDDI? But it sounds like right now it might be tricky, but in the future I can do so. Is that the
I think it really depends. If you have REST APIs, I think pretty much everything can be done. If you need other means in order to alter some sort of system, so yeah, then it probably would need some sort of further integrations. But if everything that you just described could be accomplished by consuming a REST API, then my answer would say yes. I believe it can be replaced.
Because we basically have to we are hooking into the GitHub API, so we are ourselves a GitHub bot. So you get the webhook from GitHub. Hey, something's coming in, and right now I think we do a regular expression to figure out, what the command is saying, and it just sounds like if I could configure an EDDI chat, I could just take that string and just give it to EDDI, and EDDI will come back and say, do this or execute.
Yes.
So that was what I was trying to get to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any
further?
Yeah, we got the other question from Chris here. Those JSON rules, are they valid on an application startup, on build type, per requests? What's the?
They are they are prepared in a way that they can be executed very fast. So it's not the JSON as an object that will be run through. So they are sort of translated into Java objects that are meant to run very fast. Apart from that, they need to be evaluated on every user interaction, because every time a user sends something new in or the API responds with something, you need to run these rules in order to understand, okay, where are we at? What do we need to do? How do we continue in the conversation in terms of deciding what is the next step that EDDI needs to do?
Cool. Okay. So we already talked for almost an hour. So any other things you've planned to say or missing?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think, in terms of having a conversation with EDDI, there is sort of two REST interfaces that are interesting. The one is the bot engine, and the other is the bot manager. The difference here is that we have a strategy of we create a conversation, and once you have created a conversation, then you send per user all these user inputs and get outputs back. So very sort of a low-level way of managing what kind of conversations are open and not, and these kind of things. So either use that or you use the REST bot manager, which is very easy because once you have the bot configured, you just need to send a string in, a user ID to make sure it's the distinguishing between the different users. But that's it. You don't need to care if a conversation for the user is open already, if you need to create a new one, these kind of things. So it's basically high-level framework, low-level framework, and whatever makes more sense in that use case, I would suggest to use.
Cool. And if how does people get started? Does that go on GitHub or EDDI, or what's the?
Yeah, it depends a bit. I think if you're a developer and keen on the code, GitHub is probably the best choice. If you just want to spin it up, I think Docker, let's say Docker Compose, is probably the fastest. Although with the dev tools of Corkers, it's also similarly fast. So I'm not sure which choice I would prefer. I guess for everybody that's not too familiar with Java and Quarkus, then spinning it up over Docker or Kubernetes, these kind of things is probably the easiest. And then probably getting through the first demos, looking into the manager, and trying to sort of adapt one of the demos yourself, so you get a feeling of how they work and how they behave, and like how you sort of launch a new bot version and these kind of things. And that's probably the best way to get started.
Cool. Well,
and
awesome.
get in touch if you have any issues. We will try to come back to you.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'll give a few seconds for people to yell. But basically, the way I summarize you guys is you have your engine, you had a framework. You are a framework in yourself, your chatbot framework, and you move from having an manually managed set of libraries together, and then decide to move to Corkers because fast startup times, better developer experience, and you didn't have to do all that, like you said, 30-40% of your code just kind of disappeared, and yeah, here we are, and we'll see.
Easy to get started. So like I said, everybody knowing Quarkus will have an easy time to get it up and running and understanding how it works.
Yeah, that's it. Well, cool. And I think we got ran out of questions, and we also ran out of time, but 4 minutes to spare. So I'll say thank you, and yeah, see you at episode 101 next week.